Everybody's time. Thank you. I just wanted to mention that we are recording this session, the first part of it, so that members who are unable to attend are able to catch up. So with that, I really want to welcome everybody to the kickoff session of our third quarter program. It's the first of 5 webinars that are all designed to introduce our members to ways new technology is being used in the HR lifecycle. And it's just wonderful that our first speaker, Bruce Bergwall from Degreed, sits in the center of learning as we step into our conversation today. Excuse me. Degreed is a technology suite that combines lifelong learning and data-driven development so organizations can accelerate workforce capabilities for greater impact and make skills the heart of all work. So our speaker, Bruce, who has joined us today, has spent more than 25 years helping employers use data and technology to upgrade and accelerate their workforce development and talent retention strategy. He's got a passion for helping people improve their lives through learning, and it's going to be apparent today. And he's become the go-to resource for business leaders in HR talent and talented professionals. Bruce was a former education TV producer, which I thought was really great, and his background is in adult learning and curriculum design. Please join me in welcoming Bruce. Bruce?
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. And Dina, thank you for your gracious and kind words. It's a real treat to be here. And I'm delighted with an opportunity to share and talk about some new and fascinating technologies that have come about to really help address the challenges we're all facing as we're looking to upskill and prepare people for roles, incumbents for roles inside of an organization. So over the next half hour, I've prepared a couple items to share with each one. And I also want to mention that the slides I'll be sharing, I won't be going through all of them, but I will be touching base on many of them. And but do know a copy of that deck is available. So you needn't worry about screen captures or writing things down. I'll be happy to share with you if you'd like. So we'll take it from there. So first things first, I did want to make sure, Adina, before we jump, have we got the audience here that we're looking for, and should we kick things off?
Yep, I think we should kick things off. Thank you, Bruce.
Fabulous.
And I will be monitoring the chat. So as you're watching Bruce's presentation and listening to him talk, please do share any comments and we'll try to capture them.
Great, thank you very much. Very simply, for the next 25 minutes or so, there are really 4 areas that I thought it would be helpful to touch on. Timely areas, including the whole topic around skills, the idea of creating the skills-based organization, transitioning to that. Talk a little bit about a strategy and a journey for that. And then a little bit about how Degreed actually creates the foundation for transitioning to the skills-based organization. And then I have a couple of examples. I have 5 that I've touched on, but we probably just touch on 2 or 3 for the sake of time so that you're familiar with it. As was mentioned up front, please know that even though this may seem like a monologue, I'd much prefer to have a dialogue. If there are questions about things, please break in, and I'll be happy to kick things off. So with that, let me get started here. In a nutshell, this is the problem that every employer we talk to is facing. And this is information that we've derived from both Burson and Deloitte. And really, on the left side is the obvious issue that's going on with the shrinking half-life of skills. Back in 20, 40 years ago, the typical skills had a half-life of 15 years, it's estimated. 20 years ago, it dropped to less than 2.5. Today, some people say this number may be 6 months to a year. It is dropping. And I think this is one of the challenges, is that the half-life of skills is just dropping precipitously. At the same time, the scale of innovation, we call it the rate of tech scales, but the scale of innovation has literally accelerated beyond the rate at which people can learn. And this is what we understand and we've seen as the $1 trillion skills gap today. Actually, this document's from maybe a year ago. But this is the problem. This is the issue that we're facing and we're seeing right now. And it's addressing this skills gap that most every one of the employers that we work with has and understands at some level. And what is this all about, and why does this matter? So, what I'd like to do is show you how we have found a way to help address. Can we solve everything here? Of course not, but we can help set a direction. And one of the ways that we do it, and we believe, is the emergence of the skills-based organization. My colleague, Janice Burns, who is our Chief People Officer, says in a nutshell right here, the future viability of both companies and their employees is dependent upon how quickly they can acquire skills. They can acquire the skills needed to do the work that needs to get done. So it's, in the past, we talked about jobs. In the past, we talked about degrees, even competencies. But truly, what we're seeing more and more, it's about the skill necessary to acquire and to complete a task. So that's one of the things that we're seeing. One of the items that we're seeing as a result of this is what does the skills-based organization do? Why does it matter? And what are the results that we're seeing? Again, some of this information is provided through Deloitte, who we partner with on a lot of our data, and some with Burson. But there are really three categories: business results, work environment, and talent, and how they're impacting, how the SBO is impacting these. Here again, you can see, I'll touch on a few of them, but the ability for the effectiveness, 52% more likely to innovate, just simple abilities to be to adjust and make the changes on the fly that are needed. The more likely to anticipate changes and respond to them efficiently is what a skills-based organization provides. The work environment itself, the upgrades, we've seen almost record numbers of NPS score improvements in work environments. Here we see 79% more likely to have a positive work environment, 98% more likely to have a reputation as a great place to work, and 47% more likely to provide an inclusive environment with an SBO structure and strategy in place. And then, of course, talent, just the impact that this is having on talent, and more likely to retain talent. And I think this 98% one in the bottom right corner here, or on the right side, I should say, is probably one of the most important from a value side, that we all know the cost of hiring, the cost of replacing people is dramatic. And it's one of the hidden costs that every organization is struggling with. And SBO is truly one of the ways that you can help reduce that cost of hiring and the cost of just having folks leave, and the critical impact that has on the operations, the business operations itself. I was recently talking with a large retail organization, and they're struggling with the problems associated with managers in distribution centers leaving because they don't understand certain things. They can't gather the information they need. Whereas an SBO approach to them would solve not all, but many of the problems they're facing. So even just a 1 or 2% reduction in their turnover represents literally 8 figures to their bottom line within a quarter. So these items are some of the key drivers that really hit on this. Let me move over. These are what we've identified in general as the 10 characteristics of SBO. And I think I'm not going to read through all of these, but I just wanted to give you, these are indications that will be prominent. I wouldn't say all 10 are necessary to be evident, but I think certainly a predominance of these would be in place. So I guess one question I do have for the audience, and feel free to drop out or drop in a note on the chat. How many of these are currently, do you see, and just by number, do you have 2 or 3 or 8 or possibly all 10 that your organization is currently running with? A few coming in here. Okay, great. Well, again, I think the key thing to keep in mind is these are the characteristics, what you would see, what you would find, and the ability, obviously the skills-based employees, but the skills-based organizational design. And I think this box on the bottom left side here is, again, one of the more important ones of this sector, because regardless of the technology I'll show you, if the strategy has not been set, if the strategy has not been put in place, and the plans haven't been set to move towards a skills-based organization, just adding technology is not going to solve the problem. It does require an organizational approach, an overall input from executives, from leaders, but an understanding of what the value that it represents. But okay. Let me see. Let me just go to the right ones here. The actual skills strategy journey is really a model that's very common and seen in the manufacturing world. Here we've kind of changed some of the terms that we've used, but the idea is of collecting data, assessing the data. And this is something our platform does, allows you to collect skills data from employees and then identify where the strengths and weaknesses are. Those are the first two, but the second, 3 and 4 are the other parts where our platform allows you to draw upon the knowledge, the brainware, if I will, that's inside your organization, whether it's in your LMS, whether it's in your SharePoint, whether it's with individuals, where people can move and develop those skills and then deploy those skills. Those are 2 key areas that our platform allows you to bring, and then showing the value of how those parts all come together. So those are an idea. Again, this isn't a new journey per se, but it's the use of this format, this structure that has been common in manufacturing for many years, now in the idea of setting up a skills journey. Now, what I've done here for the next few slides is shown an example of how these individual, each one of these phases, what's the steps that are involved. There's a lot here, and I'll let you folks look at the individual detail of what's involved in each one of these as we go through. But I want to just touch on a few. These first 2 are important because they're keys to getting the foundation started. But I think when you get to the developed skills, determining what type of skill building is required, using the 3 E's to help: education, experience, exposure, and then deciding on the skill approach: reskilling, upskilling, cross-skilling. Again, these are somewhat rooted in OD, and they're somewhat capable of the platform that we have that can deliver them. But I just wanted to make sure I had a chance to touch on some of the aspects that are in place. And then the deployment of the skills. How should they be used and where should they go? How that works itself through. And then the value of the skills. Being able to calculate, create the business case, measure, and then report. So all of these are parts of what's involved in creating the skills-based organization and the journey to moving things towards that. This is not only a technology we do, but it's also a service we provide, working with companies to help them in this process in getting these items in place. So let me just stop there for a second, ask if there are any questions. Dina, if there's any follow-up you have, because I'd like to move to part 2 of my conversation here.
I don't see any questions in the chat, Bruce. I'm sure people are excited to see how this all comes to play.
Great. I think when you think of technology that you have, many folks I think almost everyone has an LMS at some point. And to me, LMSs are like a library, vital resource, all the content, all the information in your organization. And I just use this image as an example of how I think of an LMS. Not that it's old, but that it's huge. And if you know what you're looking for and where to find it, it's fabulous. But if you don't, that's where the mystery comes in place. But what we do as at Degreed is we're like having a personal librarian for each employee in that library. Someone who can help you build a career path. Someone help you can build a pathway. What are the skills I need to do my job, and how do I do my job more effectively? Or how do I acquire the skills needed for a new role that I'm looking for? So much out of the way a librarian can be an assistant. And personally, for me as a student, I relied on librarians a lot. Hence the reason why I like this analogy. I lived in libraries when I was at college, and I was constantly asking for insight and direction as to how do I find some more information or a better way of understanding something. And that's what the library does. But also, the librarian, in our case, actually is also recording and providing data back about what learning has taken place, what learning has been put together. So another way of thinking about this, taking that example, I thought it'd be helpful just to show you a 50,000-foot view of how the Degreed platform sits in between your employee on the left and the different technology stacks or platforms that you currently have, in terms of it becoming the front door, whether it's through a desktop, whether it's through Teams, whether you're using a mobile device, if you have deskless workers. It's able to deliver, but it basically coalesces, organizes, and presents the information coming from an LMS, an HRIS system, whether SharePoint docs, even if you're using LinkedIn Learning, Pluralsight, or any of the many different available solutions that are out there, course providers, it can provide that information. It can organize it, and then organize it in a way that makes it easy for the employee to understand. So they're not spending time looking for things. They're spending their time learning. And I'll show examples of how this all comes together. But I thought I would just start here to kind of show the positioning of where Degreed is vis-a-vis the existing technologies have, because we don't replace your HRS. If you're using Workday, keep it. If you've got Cornerstone or Docebo or SuccessFactors as your LMS, keep it. We integrate with all those. We're partners with many of them. We're not a replacement for an LMS. We're simply a way of making it easier to use all the pieces so you don't have a variety of ways and a variety of locations to find things. So just wanted to use that as a starting point for that piece of the conversation. Let me jump over now and show you examples of how this all comes together. Here are 5 critical learning needs that we have identified, from onboarding to operating, engaging, upskilling, and reskilling. These are 5 standard ways of looking at it. Not the only ones, but they're 5 that we've used and have seen as being very useful and helpful. Underneath, you can see examples of what they represent and where they're going to be going. What I want to do now is take a few minutes to show you how the Degreed platform actually enables each one of these items to take place in a more effective way. So if I do, I'll jump down here to show you one example: onboarding, ramping up new hires, conduct business orientation sessions, upskill a team for industry education, and deliver code or conduct training to scale of workers. Some of these can be done through the LMS, but it's simpler and more seamlessly if it's done with Degreed. And let me show you an example. For example, if you're onboarding. Now here on the right side is actually screenshots of the Degreed platform for each individual. So here you would have an example of how you'd, for personalized onboarding, navigate Degreed platform. Moving through the items here, you could see how the app offers guidance. Welcome to the skills coach, bringing different pieces together. And then laying out in different simple boxes. These might be courses and learnings and guidance from disparate pieces of information inside your organization. These can be different SharePoints. These could be different aspects of the LMS, and they can be in different locations. Here, they're all brought together and they're unified in one easy to find place. Furthermore, on this onboarding aspect, if there's a need for leveraging or doing an academy style presentation, whereas this type of presentation up here is for an individual, one person learning and moving on their own. We also have the ability to move to a cohort-based learning environment using the academy platform that we have with LearnIn. This is one of our offerings that's tied in so that you can do cohorts. Using my analogy earlier, where I said an LMS is a library, the Degreed LXP is a librarian. The academies is literally like the classroom. It's where time-bound rigor and competency is assured by someone watching your work. So anyway, these are items that can all be brought to bear to help in the process. And then, of course, the dashboards that display what activity is going on for managers to see. Who's doing what, when, and how often, and how this whole process is coming together. So this is just one example in orientation, how that could possibly work. Another example would be, let me just move over here. I'll move up to a few. Let me jump through something here. I'm going to move up to skilling here, upskilling. If you had a situation where you wanted to upskill employees, grow capabilities, and keep the workforce ahead of technology, how would you do that? Well, one of the ways that we have is using the platform is the individuals can first go in and create what we'll call a skill profile. This allows each person to list out where their strengths and weaknesses are on a self basis, that is a self-evaluation basis. And they can begin identifying their capabilities and where things are at. So this begins the kind of a first step. After that, your manager will come in and then look at how you've self-evaluated and then set in case, the skill targets. Here are the things that you need to know to do this job. Here are the skills you need to work on. And so this ability to both provide what your understanding is and then have your manager come in and say, here's what you know, but here's what I need you to know. And then I make that delta obvious and give you the ability to pinpoint where that learning needs to have to take place. So that's a critical function of it. And then the ability for the learning and development to create the pathway for each individual. That is, the ability to address individual differences at scale is something the GREED can do. So that once the skills have been identified that are needed, it's easy to organize and create a pathway for that one person that they can follow and acquire the skills they need. This is truly one of the really unique and greatest strengths of what's in place. And then, of course, in addition to the individual learning path, there's also the opportunity for the academies. That is where a cohort of people working together can work with both in a synchronous and asynchronous environment over a long term. This is where more rigor may be involved. If you're, one example I will mention here, we have a number of insurance companies I work with, and they need claim specialists desperately. And one of the things that we're finding often is in those scenarios that they're looking to take incumbent employees that may be IT support or customer service. They've proven themselves to be worthy employees and good at what they've done and interested, but they don't have the skills yet to do that. And nowadays, many of the claim specialist roles are actually more about understanding the proprietary software that the company has than being a true justice statistician and actuarials. So although those skills are important, they're not what they were even just 10 years ago in many cases. So we're helping organizations with academies to fill roles. Same thing also in the healthcare field, where we are creating medical assistants and nursing assistants, high volume roles that they're just not getting filled quickly enough, but they can do it with an academy because it provides the rigor and the structure that a classroom offers, but being able to do it online. Anyway, so
Bruce,
yes.
It's Mary Mavis. I just had a question about the academy structure. So you say it's a classroom.
Yep.
Does it have the ability? So is it that people in a cohort are working independent of each other on the same modules, or also that they come to this platform and have a working session together?
Both, and they're not exclusive. There is both with the academy, there is the ability there's probably 5 different modules or 5 different ways of instruction. One of them is group, and there is lots of team activities. There's lots of team work that's being done. There are assignments that are being given inside of an academy by the instructor, but there's also the latitude for a student or an employee to go and find their own way if they want to go and learn something else. So it's a much more like a controlled, maybe not controlled, it's a classroom-like environment, but with flexibility. But there is definitely groups of people working together. You're introduced to your cohort, you meet with the leaders, you discuss things, you can share even the work you're doing. You can see what other people are doing. So it's truly a cohort experience, but because it's online, it offers some additional flexibility that you don't have in a traditional face-to-face classroom. Does that help?
Yep.
Bruce, I know you're going to be taking questions.
Yep.
I'm curious how the information comes into the technology and if there's privacy guidelines that are important for people to be aware of. Is it something that can come into an employee when they are hired? Are there things that are disclosed, and specifically around maybe learning differences, just to understand how the utilization and user experience might? Sure,
Dina. We do have a comprehensive governance plan around data, around security. We adhere to the GDPR requirements that are in Europe, which are, as you know, is a lot more stringent than they are here in the States. And what we do find is regarding data, we have to meet with each individual employee and understand what their requirements are. Because, you know, some simple things like reading, writing, listening, and speaking skills can be at different levels of people, and what is needed, what can be understood, what can be shared, what's public. Those are things that are dependent upon each employee. So we don't simply have a set rule that is across the board. We have governance standards that are based on what each individual employee needs.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And let me just wrap up here. Lastly, inside developing capabilities is also the ability in our platform to match employees with mentors, individuals in your company that may be able to provide guidance. I know this is when I joined Agreed when our company was acquired. I originally was with LearnIn for a while, and then we were acquired by Degreed. And one of the first things I did is actually went right to my colleague Jen here, who has been with Degreed for many years, and said, all right, show me how this all works. So it's just fabulous to have that ability to connect quickly and easily with people who have volunteered, who've said, I'll help, and I have knowledge in these skill areas. And it immediately matches the skill sets that are brought together quickly. So anyway, that's one of the things I want to make sure I had a chance to touch about. I won't go through the reskill as much, but again, you'll see a lot of dashboards that talk about how the skill data is brought, how we provide a stipend that makes it possible for people to purchase training and learning beyond what may be available, a Visa card that they can go for conferences, subscriptions, other things that will help them guide their learning and then moving the process along. But we also have a lot of reporting on how this data comes together, and we can provide that information. So anyway, just to wrap up, building an SBO that creates a great expectations, how it gets itself set up, you know, what I am, how I move through, how I belong here, how I'm growing, how I'm prepared, and how I'm valued. Understanding all these aspects of the onboarding, performing, engaging, upskilling, reskilling, and a rewarding process. How does this all come together? We have a platform that helps build towards this, and we help to support the effort if this is something that's in your goals as an organization going forward. I would be delighted to take any questions you have, and this pretty much brings to an end my formal part of my presentation. But know that I'm certainly going to be here to answer additional questions, and if any of you would like to